In the middle of the room, Emily was found in a distressing condition, as if something tragic had transpired. She had used an exercise band in an attempt to harm herself. The scene was harrowing, and the weight of the tragedy was palpable.
Do you believe in curses, haunted houses, or the lingering spirits of the departed? Some stories are so chilling, they seem to transcend fiction and touch the realm of the real. Welcome to Nightmare Narratives, where we delve into the darkest tales that blur the lines between reality and the supernatural. Prepare yourself for a journey into the unsettling and the unknown. During my time as a police officer in a quiet yet affluent city in Virginia, I was assigned to patrol various upscale neighborhoods. Among these, one stood out, not for its beauty or grandeur, but for the ominous reputation that clung to a particular house. It was a magnificent old colonial-style home, its white walls and perfectly manicured lawn a stark contrast to the dark stories whispered about it. The tales among the police force were eerily consistent. This house was cursed. The legend centered around a former resident, a reclusive doctor who had lived there decades ago. This doctor, brilliant but deeply troubled, had become obsessed with the idea of cheating death. According to the stories, he had attempted an experimental self-surgery, driven by a morbid fascination with the idea of operating on himself without the aid of another human being. He numbed his abdomen with a potent anesthetic and, using a scalpel, began the grisly procedure. But something went horribly wrong. The anesthesia dulled his sense of pain, but not his awareness. As he sliced deeper, he lost control, and in a grotesque twist of fate, he severed an artery. He bled out, alone, holding his own intestines in a final desperate attempt to survive. His death, as the legend goes, stained the house with a malevolent energy, an energy that seemed to cling to those who lived there afterward. Over the years, several families had moved in, but none stayed long. Whispers of strange occurrences, objects moving on their own, cold spots, and unexplained shadows circulated among the neighbors. But these stories were just the beginning. Years later, I found myself called to this very house. The call was about a young woman named Emily, who had been found dead by her older sister. It was a gray, overcast day, and as I arrived, a strange chill settled in the air. The house, standing tall and proud, seemed to leer down at me as I approached, its windows dark and lifeless. The air felt thick and heavy, as though the very atmosphere was laden with grief and something else, something darker. On the porch, I noticed something that sent a shiver down my spine. Countless empty energy drink cans scattered about, and a Ouija board lying abandoned in the corner. The combination was unsettling, as if it hinted at some frantic, desperate attempt to connect with forces beyond our understanding. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Emily's parents were sitting in the living room, their faces ashen with shock, their eyes hollow with grief. They barely acknowledged my presence, lost in their own world of pain. Emily's sister was the one who had called us, her voice trembling as she recounted the events that led to this tragic moment. She told me that Emily had become increasingly isolated over the past few months. Once a vibrant, outgoing young woman, she had withdrawn into herself, consumed by an obsession with the supernatural. The family had found her spending countless nights awake, fueled by energy drinks, attempting to communicate with spirits using the Ouija board. Her obsession had taken a toll on her mental health, and she became convinced that she was communicating with her deceased boyfriend, who she believed was urging her to join him in the afterlife. As I descended into the basement, the sense of unease grew stronger. The basement was unfinished, with exposed beams and a cold concrete floor. The walls were bare, the space dimly lit by two bare light bulbs that cast long, eerie shadows. The air was stale, thick with the smell of dust and something else, something rotten. The room was cluttered with more empty cans and another Ouija board, placed haphazardly on a small coffee table. The atmosphere was oppressive, as if the very walls were closing in on me, amplifying the sense of dread that had been building since I entered the house.
In the middle of the room, Emily was found in a distressing condition, as if something tragic had transpired. She had used an exercise band in an attempt to harm herself. The scene was harrowing, and the weight of the tragedy was palpable.
Emily's sister stood behind me, her voice barely above a whisper, as she explained how Emily had become increasingly convinced that she was being visited by her deceased boyfriend. She believed that he was urging her to join him in the afterlife, that their love was too strong to be confined by the boundaries of life and death. The family had tried to intervene, but Emily was determined, spending hours in the basement talking to what she thought were spirits. The basement had become her sanctuary, a place where she could escape the reality of her life and immerse herself in the dark allure of the supernatural. The air in the basement was thick with a sense of despair, but there was something else too, something darker, more insidious. It felt as though the walls themselves were alive, pulsating with a malevolent energy that seemed to feed off the tragedy that had unfolded there. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something unseen was lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. As I left the house that day, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of unease. The tragedy that had befallen Emily and her family felt too strange, too orchestrated to be mere coincidence. And yet, the rational part of me struggled to find a logical explanation for the events that had occurred. But deep down, I knew that there was something more to this story, something that defied explanation. If this tale of tragedy and mystery intrigued you, be sure to like and share this video. What do you think caused these events? Leave your theories in the comments below. The tragedy did not end with Emily's death. Exactly 2 weeks later, another incident occurred, this time a horrific car accident. The day was clear, but the sense of foreboding was undeniable as I drove to the scene. It was a stretch of road not far from the cursed house, and as I arrived, the sight that greeted me was horrifying. A convertible BMW lay on its roof, crumpled and mangled. The aftermath of the crash was devastating. The car had flipped multiple times, leaving a trail of debris and destruction. The driver, a middle-aged woman, was still in her seat, her head twisted unnaturally, indicating a fatal injury. Her eyes were open, staring vacantly at the sky. A man, presumably her husband, lay some distance away, having been ejected from the vehicle. His body was contorted, broken in ways that were difficult to look at. The scene was chaotic, with pieces of the car and personal belongings strewn about. As I went through the grim task of identifying the victims, I found their IDs. My heart sank as I realized these were Emily's parents. The realization hit me like a punch. First Emily, and now her parents, all within a span of 2 weeks. The chain of events was too bizarre to be mere coincidence. As we pieced together the details, it became clear that the car had lost control and struck a tree. There were no signs of braking, suggesting either a mechanical failure or, perhaps more disturbingly, something more deliberate. Informing Emily's older sister of her parents' death was excruciating. Already devastated by her sister's suicide, she now had to face the loss of her parents in a brutal accident. Her grief was raw and overwhelming, a mixture of shock and disbelief. She was the last surviving member of her immediate family, left to deal with the aftermath of a series of tragedies that felt almost orchestrated by some unseen force. The strange occurrences did not stop there. A few weeks later, another tragic event unfolded. Emily's sister, now living alone and trying to cope with her loss, was struck by a car while jogging. The accident left her in critical condition and she slipped into a coma. For weeks, she lay unconscious in the hospital, clinging to life. The doctors did what they could, but she never regained consciousness, eventually passing away. The entire sequence of events left the community in shock, whispering about the possibility of a curse on the family. The rumors grew, fueled by the eerie coincidences and the shadowy past of the house. Some believed that Emily's use of the Ouija board had opened a gateway to something malevolent. Others thought the house itself was cursed, tainted by the doctor's grisly death and the subsequent tragedies. The house became a symbol of fear and speculation, avoided by the locals and left to decay. But there was more to this story, a chilling epilogue that still haunts me to this day. After these traumatic events, I left the police force, seeking a fresh start in another state. I thought distance would bring peace, but the past has a way of lingering. I moved into a quiet neighborhood, hoping to leave the memories behind. But strange things began to happen. It started with subtle, almost innocuous occurrences. One day, while checking my mail, I noticed something small on the ground. A Ouija board planchette, the small device used to spell out messages. I felt a familiar chill as I picked it up with a stick and threw it away, trying not to think too much of it. The next day, another planchette appeared in the same spot. This time, I felt a deep sense of unease. The coincidences were becoming too hard to ignore. Memories of Emily and her family's tragedies flooded back, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me. Was it a spirit? A curse? Or just a series of bizarre coincidences? The rational part of me struggled to find a logical explanation, but the occurrences continued. Over the next few weeks, the sense of being watched grew stronger. At night, I would hear faint whispers, barely audible but unmistakably there. The lights in my house would flicker inexplicably, and objects seemed to move on their own. A book would be out of place, a picture frame tilted. These might have been easily dismissible under normal circumstances, but in the context of my experiences, they felt ominous. I began to question my sanity. Was I imagining things, or was there truly a dark presence following me? The fear became a constant companion, gnawing at the edges of my mind. I started avoiding certain areas in my home, feeling as though they were tainted. The memories of the past incidents and the current strange events intertwined, creating a narrative I couldn't escape. It was as if the very air around me was charged with a malevolent energy, something that had latched onto me and wouldn't let go. In desperation, I reached out to a spiritual advisor, someone experienced with paranormal phenomena. They suggested a cleansing ritual to rid myself of any negative energy or entities. Though skeptical, I agreed, hoping for some relief. The ritual involved burning sage, lighting candles, and reciting specific prayers meant to cleanse the space and my spirit. For a time, it seemed to work. The whispers stopped, the light stayed on, and the eerie feeling diminished. But peace was fleeting. The incidents resumed, subtle at first, then more pronounced. The planchettes continued to appear, despite my efforts to dispose of them. It felt like a message, a reminder that whatever was attached to me wasn't going away. The spiritual advisor suggested more drastic measures, including moving again, but I hesitated. How could I outrun something that seemed to defy physical boundaries? In the quiet moments, the weight of the past bore down on me. The memories of Emily, her tragic end, her family's catastrophic deaths, and the unexplainable occurrences that followed me were like shadows that I couldn't shake. I began to fear sleep, where nightmares of the events plagued my rest. In these dreams, I was often in that basement, surrounded by darkness, with faint whispers echoing around me. The dreams grew darker, more vivid, as time went on. Each night, I found myself reliving the horrors of that house. The basement, cold and foreboding, became a recurring theme. I would wander through it, lost and disoriented, the walls seeming to close in on me. In the shadows, I would see figures, indistinct but undeniably there. They watched me with eyes that burned with malevolent intent, their whispers growing louder, more insistent. They called my name, urging me to join them, to succumb to the darkness that had consumed Emily. I would wake up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding, the echoes of those voices still ringing in my ears. The line between dream and reality blurred, and I found myself questioning whether I was truly awake or still trapped in some nightmarish vision. The fear became a constant presence, a weight that bore down on me, sapping my strength and my will to fight. I started seeing things during the day as well. Shadows flitted at the edges of my vision, vanishing when I turned to look. Objects would move when I wasn't looking, their new positions subtle but unmistakable. The planchettes continued to appear, each one seeming to mock my attempts to rid myself of them. I tried burning them, burying them, even throwing them into a river. But they always came back, waiting for me when I returned home. The isolation took its toll. I withdrew from friends and family, unable to explain what was happening to me. How could I tell them that I was being haunted, that something dark and malevolent had latched onto me? They would think I was crazy, and maybe they would be right. But I knew, deep down, that this was real. The fear was too palpable, too insistent to be a mere figment of my imagination. I began to fear for my own life. The deaths of Emily and her family weighed heavily on me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was next. The sense of being watched grew stronger, the whispers louder, more demanding. They wanted something from me, something I couldn't or wouldn't give. And so I fought, clinging to the last shreds of my sanity, refusing to give in to the darkness that threatened to consume me. In a final act of desperation, I reached out to a paranormal investigator, someone who specialized in cases like mine. They agreed to come to my home to see if they could identify the source of the haunting and hopefully put an end to it. They arrived with an array of equipment, cameras, audio recorders, EMF detectors, all designed to capture evidence of the paranormal. The investigation lasted for hours. The investigator moved from room to room, taking readings, setting up cameras, asking questions into the empty air. I followed them, a silent witness to their work, my heart pounding with anticipation. I hoped, prayed, that they would find something, that they would validate my experiences and offer a solution. As the night wore on, the atmosphere in the house grew heavier, more oppressive. The investigator noted several anomalies: spikes in EMF readings, unexplained cold spots, and most disturbingly, whispers captured on the audio recorder. The whispers were faint, almost imperceptible, but they were there, and they were saying my name. The final part of the investigation took place in my bedroom, where the sense of unease was strongest. The investigator set up a camera facing my bed and left an audio recorder on the nightstand. They instructed me to lie down, to try and sleep while they monitored the equipment from the next room. I reluctantly agreed, though the thought of sleeping under such scrutiny made my skin crawl. As I lay there, the whispers began again. At first, they were faint, barely audible, but they grew louder, more insistent. The darkness in the room seemed to thicken, pressing down on me, suffocating me. I could feel a presence, something malevolent and hungry, lurking just beyond the edge of the bed. My heart raced, my breath came in shallow gasps, and I fought the urge to flee, to tear myself out of bed and run as far and as fast as I could. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take it any longer, something touched me. It was a light, almost imperceptible pressure on my arm, but it was enough to send a jolt of terror through me. I bolted upright, my eyes wide with fear, but there was nothing there. The room was empty, the darkness undisturbed, but the whispers continued, a chorus of voices that seemed to echo from the very walls. The investigator rushed in, alerted by the spike in the equipment readings. They asked me what had happened, and I told them, my voice trembling with fear. They checked the camera and the audio recorder, and what they found sent chills down my spine. The camera had captured a shadowy figure standing at the foot of my bed, its form indistinct but unmistakably humanoid. It watched me as I slept, its eyes, if it had eyes, locked onto me with a malevolent intent. The audio recorder had picked up the whispers, but they were clearer now, the voices overlapping in a cacophony of sound. They were calling my name, urging me to join them, to give in to the darkness. The investigator paled as they reviewed the evidence. They had seen many things in their line of work, but this was something different, something darker than anything they had encountered before. They advised me to leave the house, to put as much distance between myself and this place as possible. But I knew, deep down, that it wouldn't matter. Whatever this was, it had latched onto me, and no amount of running would save me. In the days that followed, I tried to take their advice. I packed my things, prepared to leave, but something held me back. The house, with all its darkness and malevolence, had become a part of me. The fear was still there, gnawing at the edges of my mind. But there was something else too, something almost comforting in its familiarity. I couldn't leave, not really. The darkness had claimed me, and I was too tired, too broken to fight it anymore. And so I stayed, a prisoner in my own home, haunted by the shadows that lurked in the corners, by the whispers that echoed through the walls. I continued the cleansing rituals, holding on to the hope that they might one day work, that I might one day be free of this curse. But the truth is, I don't believe that will ever happen. The darkness is a part of me now, and it will follow me, no matter where I go. Have you ever experienced something that defies explanation? Share your stories with us in the comments below. And if you're drawn to tales of the supernatural and the unexplained, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Join Nightmare Narratives as we explore the mysteries that lie just beyond the veil of our reality.